Hello, and welcome to The Foundation, a Parks People podcast, presented by the National Association of Park Foundations. And now, your host and Executive Director of the National Association of Park Foundations, Kevin Korenthal.
Well, hello, and welcome back to The Foundation, a Parks People podcast. I'm Kevin Korenthal, your host and the Executive Director of the National Association of Park Foundations, and I am very excited about today's guest. Well, first of all, I got to show you my shirt. The Santa Clarita Park and Recreation Commission was where I got a lot of my early involvement in Parks and Recreation. I'm pretty sure it's a major reason why the board of directors chose me over the hundreds of other candidates there were for the position of executive director of this organization. I kid you. But one of the people who I think was most instrumental, and I think is always instrumental when you're serving in a volunteer capacity with a public agency, is that staff director, the person really behind organizing the work of the commission, liaising with the rest of the departments in the agency, and just making it a pleasurable and efficient experience. So I want to go ahead and take the opportunity to introduce my former Parks and Recreation director, who now is with another organization, which we'll talk about, Rick Gould.
Hi, Kevin. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. So I always like to begin at the beginning, and the beginning began when your education and life started to take the turn towards a career in Parks and Recreation. Tell us about that.
Well, it's kind of an unusual start. After 40 years or so, when you reflect back on it, you're kind of surprised at how you got there. But I actually started as an ocean lifeguard. I was working in Santa Cruz, California. It was my summer job to work on the beaches. And over a progressive period of time, I promoted, eventually becoming the person responsible for all the beaches and aquatics in Santa Cruz, California. And that was in the Parks and Recreation Department. So it was sort of a winding path, if you will, that got me into the profession. I was exposed, particularly through professional organizations like the California Parks and Rec Society, to a much bigger world than just the beaches and aquatics. And I was involved in those, as well as the obvious day-to-day operations of everything that we did. But I'm not too sure that many people came out of the beach lifeguard world into the leadership roles that I had in Parks and Recreation. Ultimately, I ended up in Santa Clarita, California.
It's interesting. I think you're right. I've talked to a lot of park directors in my role here at NAPF, and none of them were lifeguards. But it makes perfect sense. First of all, it's a beautiful job to have. Having done a little bit of pool lifeguarding myself, I mean, it's sit around in the sun and watch beautiful people and just have the opportunity to be out there, outside. Any job that you can do to be outside is going to be great, I think.
Absolutely, yeah. And being part of emergency services, particularly in California, the lifeguards in California on the beaches, while they've been played up in by Hollywood and things like Baywatch and stuff like that, they truly are part of the emergency services community out here. And I think that gives you a different perspective on how stuff ought to be done too, and how there are different management styles and how you put a lot of pieces together. And I think aquatics is unusual in the sense that many aquatics operations encompass all facets of operations. It's not just putting on a program or something like that. There are safety implications, there are management implications, your HR implications, just
events.
Events. Yeah, events are crazy. Dealing with legal issues like HIPAA. And medical situations, for that matter, life and death. And over time, I think aquatics people, and I'm biased, but I think aquatics people are very well equipped to work in the Parks and Recreation field.
So you went from lifeguarding at the beach, which I know lifeguards are in California, especially, are some of the most well-trained people in their profession. How did you get to come to Santa Clarita from there? Well, there's no beach. There's no beach in Santa Clarita.
Beach in Santa Clarita. I advanced in a couple of different jobs. One in the city of Santa Cruz, I moved up to what they called the health and safety officer, responsible for unemployment issues, OSHA stuff, all that, and risk management. And eventually, there was an opportunity to move to the city of Pleasanton, California, as a community services manager. I spent a couple of years there, worked on some very unique projects, including helping to build the golf course. a very diverse opportunity. And but I was encouraged by my mentor in Pleasanton and some others that I had the skills to become a director. They encouraged me to chase it. Santa Clarita came around. My wife has significant Southern California connections. I went to university down here. And so I wasn't, strictly a Northern California guy. And when Santa Clarita became available, I took the dive and was ultimately selected back around the year 2000.
So your situation is both unique and not unique. It's unique. It's not unique in the fact that you worked in several other parts of the country before you came to ended up being your director role, but also you are unique because you stayed there for a very long time and you still work within a community just, a stone's throw away.
Right.
So were there other opportunities you were looking at? How again was Santa Clarita selected for you in your mind?
Well, a couple of different things. Yeah, I looked at a lot of opportunities, and I don't want to say I was fairly selective, but I was selective. I was looking for progressive and opportunistic places to go. At the time, Santa Clarita it really fit that bill. And it was something that was very exciting to me. Santa Clarita at the time was essentially a brand new city. I think it was only 12 years old
12 years
when I came, when I got there. And it had just been formed. It was in a place of significant growth like you see in many areas of the country, Texas, Arizona. And with growth, there is typically money. You have a very financially stable environment. And it also uniquely had the opportunity to build in that because of a variety of reasons, and I won't tell you the negative side of that, but there were significant deficits in terms of facilities, parks, trails, and community programming. And so the community wanted that. In fact, that's one of the reasons the city was formed was, we don't have what we should have. And so to be able to go to a place where you're basically given the keys to the Parks and Recreation Kingdom and say, go do it and get it done was challenging. The other thing I really liked about Santa Clarita at the time was their motto was anti-bureaucratic or non-bureaucratic. They did not want process and rules to bog down the process. That's not to say they didn't do it, but it was, let's get stuff done. Let's not talk about it.
Right.
And so that there were a lot of really, there were incentives, quite frankly, to want a job like that. And it worked out. Well,
and for my listeners who are unfamiliar with Santa Clarita, California, it is it's northern Los Angeles County. It's a city nestled between two major freeways that sprawls both flat and hilly areas of its existence, and has, through acquisition of space and other types of legal maneuvers, has grown substantially in the footprint that it has. And it's considered one of the fastest growing suburban cities in California. It's been on the safest cities list numerous times. And if I were to pound for pound, and I've been through facilities all over the country for biking and parks, some of the best, off-road trail systems and partnerships. And it's no easy feat. You have several other agencies that operate in that space, forestry, the county. And talk to us about when you got there in 2000, which was a very long time ago. And it was a very different city back then. What did you find when you got there? What were some of the early priorities that you jumped into to get your feet wet and get involved?
Yeah, let me I want to just add a little bit to what you just said about the size of Santa Clarita. And a lot of people don't realize it, but it's the third largest city in Los Angeles County. Now, only the city of Los Angeles and the city of Long Beach are bigger. And the metropolitan area of Santa Clarita probably is in the neighborhood of 350,000 people. I think in the city itself, it's about 250. And the other interesting statistic about it is it's massive. It is probably over 70 square miles right now in size. And, just planning your day, in some cases, you had to plan 45 minutes to an hour, even without traffic, just to get across the town. So it was a challenging location. But what they didn't have, and to answer your question more directly, is there were only 7 parks in about 60 square miles when I got there. There were no major facilities like you would think in the Parks and Recreation world today. And so that was an initial challenge. How do we get us up to standards, if you will. How many, we should have X number of parks for X number of people, and all the metrics that are out there that come from NRPA and those types of things. And so with growth, fortunately, there is, as I indicated before, there is funding. Developers are required to dedicate parks, and we work very diligently to increase the number of parks, the number of park land. Near the end of my time there, we worked extremely hard on acquiring open space and trails. And we also built some major facilities in that time frame, an aquatic center, community centers, and those types of things. So it was a challenging and very exciting time in many respects. I think the city, when I left, went from 7 parks to somewhere in the neighborhood of 35 parks by the time I was gone.
Wow.
Which, I remember one year in particular, during the budget year, going into the city manager and saying, by the way, we're opening 7 parks next year, and I need 10 employees, or whatever the numbers were. But it was 7 parks, and that's unheard of. Certainly in that time frame, that was shocking to be able to add at that pace.
Santa Clarita is well known for its recreational capabilities. I think the Tour of California, which is defunct now, was Santa Clarita was a host city for most of the history of that particular event. What I really, in addition to just the great weather in Southern California, another amenity that I really appreciated was the paved off-road trail system. And some of that is due to geography that just made it the riverbed, allowing for a good bed for creating trail systems. Mm-hmm. Other communities here, even here in the Dallas area, they're struggling to try to bring themselves up to a level even minutely similar in the amount of safe off-road trails that are available. Can you talk us a little bit about how that genesis happened? Because a good bit of that trail system was built while you were the director.
A lot of it had to do with the planning that was done by the developers in the area, because there was one master developer, and the city said to the developer early on, you will provide parks, you will provide trails, and they will interconnect. And the developer thankfully embraced that and saw that as an amenity that was frankly increasing the property value of what they were trying to sell. So right. It was in their best interest to be able to go ahead and do it. But I think the key to that was having a plan and having it overlaid on the map, if you will, so that when opportunities arose, you could go in and deal with it. And there were many times where people would say, well, you can't put a trail from point A to point B because you don't own the land at C. And our approach was, well, let's build A and B, and someday C will come along. The middle will come along. And rather than being afraid to not do it, we did it. And frankly, that created an impetus to fill the gaps. You probably remember, Kevin, during our time there, hearing the word gap closure a million times, over whether it was a road or a trail. And it was actually, to some degree, a strategy. I think the other thing we said is you don't have to build it all at once. And, if you have a trail that's going to cost you $10 million and you don't have $10 million, but you got $1 million, then build 1/10 of the trail. And we took that approach that over a 10-year period, we could incrementally get to the place that we wanted to be. So we had to have the long vision in place as well.
Now, so almost a lifetime resident of Santa Clarita until I left for Texas in 2017, joined as an appointed to the Park and Recreation Commission in 2014. And really the key project that was ongoing and was completed shortly after I left, right before the pandemic, I think, is when the Canyon Country Community Center, which, for those who don't know, Canyon Country is a section of Santa Clarita that was long in the tooth and had not had a lot of the resources that were given to other parts of that community. Can you talk a little bit about the genesis of that project and some of the solutions to diversity and equity that were solved through that project?
Yeah, Santa Clarita, when they came together, were 4 separate communities, as you highlight, and Canyon Country was one of them. And they had been there, that community had been in existence, 50, 60 years, whereas some of the newer developments that I was talking about earlier were probably only at most 10 years old at the time that I got there. So there was a disparity. And it appeared that the money was going to the new stuff, even though it was developer money. And so there was an emphasis on trying to make sure that there was some balance throughout the community. And one of the things we did was a Parks and Rec master plan with a great design firm out of San Juan Capistrano called RJM Design Group. And in that master plan, we said the 4 communities ought to have a community center. And each of those communities should have some place that is central to it, particularly at, when you think of 65 square miles, that's bigger than the city and county of San Francisco by a lot, by another third. And so having a place in each community where people can go and get services, regardless of what they are, whether they're equity based or if they're recreation based, or if they're simply, a place to go and a place to chill, made a lot of sense to us. We already had a temporary community center in the Newhall community. That was our first significant project. We built that community center in the late 2000s. It became a hub of the community and still is today. You have to almost get out of the way when the kids get out of school because they're just flooding in. The next community we focused on was Canyon Country, and Canyon Country Community Center became a focal point for a lot of different reasons. One was we knew we were going to get the community into the facility. We had the same type of demographic as we had in Newhall to some degree. We had some low-income issues in the area, so we knew we needed it. But the other part of it that I thought was fairly significant is the site we finally settled on and were able to purchase was the major crossroads in the Canyon Country community. And it was, to say dilapidated would be being polite. It was open, arid land that had been developed many, many years ago and then fallen into disrepair. Oh, yeah. It had floodplain issues. It had some buildings that were just simply put eyesores, billboards, all kinds of neat stuff.
It was. That was at a congested part of the community as well.
Heaviest intersection in that part of that community. Could take you 3 or 4 light cycles to get through there at the end of the day. And we had the opportunity to buy this piece of land. And I think it was transformative in that not only did we provide a place for this community center that ultimately got built after I left and you left, but it transformed that community's perception of itself in many respects. It's now it's not just a community center. There's a large public park that was designed to host not only park-like settings and perhaps some sports, but also major events. And it has become a hub, if you will, in the Canyon Country area on top of the beautification that occurred just naturally. It's a pretty cool project.
And really a crown in the hat of a community that has always taken parks and recreation very seriously and has looked at the landscape. And but then things come to an end. I leave, and then you end up leaving Santa Clarita.
I didn't leave. I retired.
Yes. Well, semi-retired, because you ended up on a new project. Talk to us about One Arroyo, how that happened and what that is.
So in my when I first moved to Santa Clarita, I lived in Santa Clarita, but there was an opportunity for me and my family to move to Pasadena back around 2010. And my wife, as I indicated before, my wife's family is generally from this area. And there was some, school and all those kinds of things come up. And we moved to Pasadena. We live in close proximity to the Rose Bowl. And as things turn out, I happened to get to know the general manager of the Rose Bowl. And the general manager of the Rose Bowl had embarked on a process in 2017 called the Arroyo Advisory Group. And he said, "I hear you're retiring. What are you going to do when you're done?" And I said, "I don't know." And he said, "Why don't you come to this meeting?" And the rest is history. I should backtrack for a second and say one of the major pieces of work that I did when I was in Santa Clarita was working with land conservancies all throughout Southern California. I was actually the appointed representative to the Santa Monica Mountains Conservancy, and to this day I remain on a joint powers authority with as the Conservancy's representative to the Desert and Mountains Conservation Authority. All that is focused around, it's an alphabet soup. All that is focused around land preservation, purchase of open space to prevent development, to facilitate wildlife transitions, everything you can think of that's good about going out into the open spaces that we have in the United States. So I was sort of uniquely qualified to start working on the Arroyo Advisory Group. I had the background in Parks and Recreation, but for the last 5 years, I've been spending a lot of my time buying open space for the city of Santa Clarita. We had a designated fund for it that the voters gave us. We had, by the time I'd left, purchased about 20,000 acres of open space for recreation and wildlife purposes. We'd added trails to that. So they were interested in my skill set. And for those who don't know, you see the Rose Bowl on TV on New Year's Day, maybe not so much anymore with the college football playoff, but you certainly see the Rose Parade. But surrounding the Rose Bowl is 1,000 acres of public parkland. And I call the Rose Bowl the donut hole, and the Arroyo Seco around the Rose Bowl, the donut. And through a variety of steps, it was the city of Pasadena chose to focus attention on that 1,000 acres. If you're down in the Arroyo Seco on any given day, and you and I have taken this walk, you can be down at the Arroyo Seco, down at the stream bed, and not realize you're in the center of Los Angeles.
Right. No,
you just don't. You can't believe you're in a wild environment, and you see, the birds, everything that's the wildlife that's going on down there. And so the city's intent was to focus new attention on the Arroyo, on the things that needed to be done. They had unfunded projects they wanted to accomplish. They wanted really a new vision for the Arroyo Seco. And I was asked to lead a new foundation. It's called the One Arroyo Foundation. And the intent of that foundation was initially to raise funding to supplement the city of Pasadena's efforts in the Arroyo Seco. It has grown. And we can talk about that, but that's what I'm doing today as a consultant. I live on the Arroyo. It's part of my life. I drive through it every day to go to the store. I walk, my furry friend down here, Rebel, in the Arroyo almost every morning. And to be able to live in a community, to enhance it, and to keep the natural beauty of it in such an urban environment, and then provide that to all the residents of not just Pasadena, but it's a regional draw for Los Angeles.
And my understanding is, though the city of Pasadena is probably the biggest stakeholder involved in this, there's a number of other as there always is in California, stakeholders that had to be brought to the table. I'm just curious, what was your role in getting everybody on the same page, or how did that process come to be? Because I know how difficult it can be to get various types of, landowners to all agree to use a particular asset in one particular way.
Well, the easy answer to that, or the short version, is consensus. You got to build consensus. Before I retired, that process had already begun. And the city, in conjunction with the Rose Bowl, had hired some consultants, primarily out of the East Coast, to manage that public side of the process. They had made pretty significant progress. By the time I got involved, they were starting to get down to more detail. And that's when the consensus fell apart, because there are certainly those out there who want us to do nothing. There are people out there that want us to do everything. And there are people out there that have special interests that say, no, only do that. And so the challenge was taking that initial consensus, turning it into a viable project, which we now call the One Arroyo Trail, and then designing a trail that met the consensus standards, is the way I would say that. And that's all done through, public processes that are readily available. You see them frequently in the Parks and Recreation world or planning world, but also through shoe leather. Going out to community groups, sitting down with people and saying, no, that we're not going to do that. We're not going to put this edifice in the middle of a natural setting and call it good. We're going to respect the natural setting. We're going to restore, or we're going to enhance. And enhance doesn't mean concrete. Enhance means, make sure the trail doesn't erode in a heavy winter like we had last year. So that it's shoe leather. You go out and you talk to people, and you tell them what you want to do, and you prove it. And we were very fortunate that we had the funding from our board to be able to hire a qualified design firm. We had the book that showed the designs. I call it the book of pretty pictures, but that's what it is. Underlying it are the construction documents that tell you how we're going to deal with the erosion or whatever it is. But when somebody can sit and look at something and say, oh, that will make my walk in the morning better, and everybody starts to say the same thing, you get there.
And, Southern California is known for a fitness lifestyle, and, gyms are great and everything, but, really where I think the best time spent improving, your health is being outdoors. This beautiful asset that if you're ever in Southern California, if you can get over to where the Rose Bowl is, there's lots of signage in the area to get you direct. I would go out there and it'd be worth a visit, even if you have to go a little distance. One Arroyo is also a member of the National Association of Park Foundations, though with a person as knowledgeable as Rick is, he probably provides me more direction than I do to him. But I owe a lot of what I know today to the time serving with him and through our friendship and our working together. I also want to encourage everyone out there who's watching the podcast today that you can be a member of the NAPF as well. Your resources go towards helping us create and build park foundations and strengthen park foundations for communities not as well endowed as Pasadena and Santa Clarita are, urban communities where there are a lot of stresses on economics. And that's where we're doing most of our work today. But we also have the opportunity to talk to folks like Rick, who have had splendid careers, really making a big difference in parks and recreation. If there's a Hall of Fame, I'm going to nominate him to it. But I want to thank my guest today, Rick. We've already chewed through our 25 minutes together, but I want to thank Rick for joining us today. And I want to let everyone know again, please, if you are not a member of the NAPF, sign up. And we'll see you on the next The Foundation, a Parks People podcast. Thanks, Rick.
All right. Thanks, Kevin.
Thanks for tuning into The Foundation, a Parks People podcast. If you like what you heard, subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/@the-NAPF to not miss an episode. To help this podcast grow, please like, comment, and share with your friends. Have a great day.